All right, welcome everybody to Quest for Success with Rick Keller. Today we have Andrew Harkins with us, um, lender for Movement Mortgage. And the name doesn't matter, but this is a little bit different than what we normally do. I'm normally talking to real estate agents, trying to figure out their story, why they're successful. And so Andrew is a super successful business person in his field. He's been in the business for 19 years. Correct me if I'm wrong on some of this. Has been top 1% in the country for about 6 years. Been top 1%, we'll say, in units for the last 8 or 9 years. He's been with the company he's with right now, and has an incredible team, which not every lender has. Like, I'm very comfortable in real estate with lenders that are just individuals. And so for you to have to build a team, it means that your volume and your business was more than what you can handle. And you've had this team for a long time. So, obviously you're doing numbers, you're super successful in that regard. So what I like to hear is, how did you, what's your background? Like, did you go to school? Did you, and how did you find your way into lending? Like, why that pathway?
So I went to school to be a chef. I was cooking.
What?
Yeah, weird. I got culinary degree from Baltimore International College. Was working full time while I was going to college just to try to like get ahead. You know what I mean? So when I came out, I was not like, starting out, not getting paid well, and I kind of at the
Mm-hmm.
bottom rung. So I'm, no stranger to work. I mean, always just kind of was like probably one of my bigger regrets in life. I didn't take it easier when I was younger, just enjoy life a little bit, in
Mm-hmm.
my early 20s. And I was always super serious about my career and like getting places. So worked the whole time I was basically in college, pretty much full time, but also went, and culinary school is a little different because it's, you're 40 hours because you're in what they call labs. So got through
Okay.
that. And then, wound up being like an executive chef of a big restaurant. Um, they ran into like a little bit of financial difficulties. They had some issues with they took like a short note when they opened the restaurant.
Oh.
And I worked there basically up until things got pretty rough from a financial standpoint. And my brother-in-law, he had a mortgage company at the time, and they were doing a lot of refinances and things like that. It was kind of during that like refi boom and like that pre
Oh.
2007 meltdown. It was probably like that 02, 03, 04 kind of market. Um, and that's really kind of when I jumped in. I didn't know anything. Like literally when I started in the mortgage industry, I didn't even know what an email was. Like didn't know what an email was, didn't know how to open one, didn't know how to address it, didn't know how to click send. Like Outlook was like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? So like I can remember that to this day, just kind of jumping in and being super overwhelmed. He did a lot for me kind of starting out. He spent a lot of time training. I didn't know even what the word equity meant. You know what I mean? Like we went through like a list of acronyms, but I was also in my early 20s. You know what I
Right.
mean? I'm super
Right.
wet behind the ears. At that time I didn't realize like how important reading was, and like knowledge, and like absorbing things. Like I was just worried about like just going out and partying and being 20. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
being a young guy, and just doing what young guys do. um and in retrospect, he basically was like, hey, come work for me. You'll be out of work by 3 4 o'clock on Fridays. You'll work 10 to 7. And you're going to make the same or more money. And that to me in my early 20s, I was kind of like, I was working that chef lifestyle, was getting out at, I don't know, maybe on a weekend, 1 a.m. during the
Mm-hmm.
week, 9, 10. I mean, it's kind of one of those things. My dad even said to me before I got in, he's like, you're not going to like the lifestyle. But like every, hard-headed kid, I just did what I did. You know what I mean? And I don't regret it. It kind of shaped a little bit about who I am.
Sure.
Um, Definitely got to meet a lot of great people, still friends with some of those people to this day. Really enjoy food to this day, but just that, being in that industry, it's a lifestyle. And very much like real estate's kind of a lifestyle, and our industry is kind of a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that kind of revolves around everybody else's schedule.
Hmm.
So that aspect of things never bothered me, but I jumped in, fast forward, was doing refis. I was actually started the first leads I ever called, the first refinance candidates were what they would call cancels. So, you know, I don't know how much you know about, mortgages and refinance leads, but basically, you know, when a bank is set up to do business with a company like Lending Tree, we would pay for those leads, and those leads can range in cost, at the time, from $100 to $250, we'll say, right?
Mm.
But then additionally, they would charge you if you would fund a loan. So they would run reports and see if
Wow.
you funded a deal for them. And that was like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, depending upon the lead.
Jeez.
But those leads are really high quality. I mean, they had social security numbers, they had names, date of birth. I mean, they had every piece of information. So I kind of got started, and I can literally remember sitting there making my first call to this day. And I was so freaked out to make that call because I was so scared that because I didn't know anything, these people would flush me out, right? Like they would know that I didn't know anything about anything. And, I remember making that first call and it rang, and it literally hit voicemail. So, and then I remember just being like, God, you're such an idiot. Like, what are you afraid of? You know what I mean? Like, you kind of think back on it, and now in retrospect, like people will give me a phone number and they'll be like, oh, I forgot to get this person's name, and I'll just call. You know what I mean? I'll wiggle my way through it or talk to the client and figure out their name, kind of get the information I need to move on. But it just shows like where you came from to where you are, kind of thing. And
Hmm.
those refinance leads, they were all what we would call like a canceled lead. So like, maybe a loan officer would have gotten them like a month or 2 months before, and they never got them on the phone. And my job was to try to go back to old leads and
Wow.
basically like convert them. That's what they give you when you're starting out. It's like, we're
Yeah.
not going to give you the good leads. We're going to give you the what we'll call cancels or canceled leads, where basically like nobody ever got on the phone. And to understand kind of the Lending Tree environment, you have 5 or 6 lenders calling you. At the time, texting really wasn't a thing. So it's just like you're blowing up people's phone. You call them 5, 6 times a day,
Mm.
varying times. You're emailing them. You know what I mean? And then you got to get them on the phone and convince them to do business with you over everybody else. I mean, it became very quick, and something to me that's no different in real estate, mortgage lending, every aspect of life. It's a relationship business. It's
Yeah.
all about the relationships you create. So that's how I got in, man. Long story short, a little bit of a wild ride and weird thing. I like everybody else's, I'm sure.
So then, it's you're new, you're young. Like I think there's certain personalities that are fine with knocking on doors and calling. It doesn't bother them. They can take the
Yeah.
no. But for the large majority of people, cold calling, following up on leads, any of that stuff is just like levels below public speaking. Like it's a big time fear, and it's very difficult. So as somebody coming out of culinary school, no sales background, no, and when you were cooking, I mean, how much you don't really have interaction with the public, right? You're just working with your
Yeah.
team. So you didn't even have like what I would say customer service, retail type experience of having to deal with people as a young man.
Oh,
Um,
I knew nothing. I look back at some of the challenges I encountered as a chef to this day, and I'm kind of like, I could have handled that a hell of a lot better. You know what I mean? Like not knowing, like you don't know what you don't know. You know what I
yeah.
mean? You're just kind of like young and dumb, don't realize it at the time. But now I'm looking back and I'm like, man, if I would have known even like an inkling, you know what I mean? Or been more concerned with education, or like reading some books that could have given me some insight on sales, or communicating with people, like whew, that'd have been like a very, very different level. But like that job itself was not customer facing. As
Hmm.
far as my customer facing would be walking through the restaurant to go to the bar to get some type of liquor to make some kind of dish, and maybe somebody stopped me and said, hey, my dinner was great. That's about as far forward as it really went.
So what did it take, or what did you do to go from, praying and relief that the call went to voicemail, you have to talk to somebody,
Yeah.
how did you go from that to like, no idea just give me the phone, I'll take care of this, and having that comfort level. I mean, obviously you're talking about 19 years, but um, when was it? Did it take you 2 years? Did it take you 5 years? Like, when did you feel, not when you got good at it, but when did you feel comfortable to be like, I'm good? How long did it take, and what was the process? Like, what did you have to learn? What did you have to go through?
Candidly,
Yeah.
sometimes my stomach still turns when I got to make phone calls. You know what I mean? To
Okay.
this day, because I'm just, I think by nature like an introvert.
Hmm.
But what I would say is I probably didn't hit a stride with it till being there a few months, but definitely calling deals that were almost looked at as like not really deals definitely made it easier. Um, I see a lot of times where real estate agents will not go the team route to start. They'll kind of work, their database, their friends, their family. And I got to be honest with you, like, I don't think that's necessarily a great choice for someone that has no sales skill, no sales background. Like, I think if I would have started that way, I would have absolutely failed. Do you know what I mean? Like, I needed that mentorship, like needed that help. I needed people to, we did a daily sales meeting. We're pulled into the sales meeting, talk about objection handling. I mean, it was hyper focused on like converting. Do you know what I mean? And because, basically I'm in a call center, right? Like
Hmm.
we'll call it what it is. Like, I don't have relationships with real estate agents. I don't have, like I'm literally calling people in Georgia. This was pre-licensing. Like, you didn't have to have a license then. So I could work leads in California, Texas.
Oh.
I've closed loans all over the country at that time. Okay. Didn't know any of the people. It was all about building relationships. But I can tell you, like, I probably didn't hit a stride with it, till several months in. And my brother-in-law was nice enough to give me kind of a draw kind of pay schedule
Oh.
to kind of warm me up. He knew I was a hard worker. You know what I mean? He knew I didn't have a problem with working hard. He knew he just kind of needed like to have like they already had a good training program. So he knew he just needed to kind of work me through and kind of just give me the reps. You know what I mean? But I think that's what a lot of new salespeople need for sure. They don't know how to talk to people.
So there's the people skills aspect, right? Knowing how
Yep.
to talk to people, knowing how to close, knowing how to build relationships. I just count that as people skill. Like, you can learn how to do that. It's definitely, it's a skill. But I think what's really interesting is you're, so you've done personality tests. We've talked about this in the past. I'm
Yep.
confident that you're very clear on you know, what personality you are, depending on what the test is that you'll be taking. So as an introvert, um, I it's really, really hard. And
Yeah.
so many people quit, whether it's real estate, whether it's, you know, mortgages, and there's a lot of fields that have sales fields that this is the same thing. Did you ever think about quitting? Did you ever get to a point where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I just can't do this anymore." The anxiety, the fear, the lack of
Um,
confidence. I mean,
I mean, I think like once you see the income potential of what comes from this business,
mhm,
whether it's real estate or mortgages, once you get to a certain point, you're kind of like, oh, like I just need to keep going at this. I just need to keep cracking at it, keep working at it, keep working at it. Because I mean, it's a great source of income. I mean, I don't, salespeople are traditionally the highest paid people
right.
in the world, like, you know what I mean, and business owners for that matter, but salespeople. So, I definitely during there was like a time in the very beginning when like the refi market was drying up, rates were going up. We had that kind of 2006, 2007 mortgage market crash, we'll call it. Um, that I basically fully transitioned from taking refi leads and did probably some of the dumbest things I could have ever done, which is basically like be like, oh, I'm gonna go just be self-generated at this point. I'm not gonna take any leads and I'm just gonna go figure it out on my own. I knew how to put a loan together, right?
Hmm.
but didn't know anything about what builders or realtors or those people kind of wanted or needed. Do you know what I mean? Um, but I was like a dog with a bone with a loan in the aspect of once I got my hands on it, like I was
Mhm.
going to do whatever I could do to close it. You know what I mean? Which I think is one of the key elements of my business. Do you know what I mean? Is not just taking the easy stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like I could sit here and cherry pick loans all day. Before we jumped on this call, I'm working on a self-employed deal with 4 businesses. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like trying to piece it together and get all the documentation and all that kind of stuff. So I've always kind of been that way. But there was definitely a time where that market was kind of making that shift. I was a young guy, didn't have a lot of responsibility, had a mortgage, but like didn't have like a ton of debt and stuff. So I was just like, I can figure this out, you know. That was at a different time where compensation in my industry was paid kind of more similar to how real estate's paid, where you just made a percentage of the total revenue. Now they've kind of shifted out of that model because of some financial regulation that's going on. So, you know, basically the model that everybody's on now is everybody gets charged the same. You know what I mean? Whether and it's loan amount driven, whether we want to charge them that or not. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So there is no like, hey, you have a really high credit score, you get a better deal than someone's got a really bad credit score, kind of thing. But that time period in that market, it was definitely one of those times where I'm like, ugh, like I'm doing some things that were very new to me at that time, which were uncomfortable, which was face to face. I never had to do that, you
Uh,
know. I was always on the phone. I was living and dying by the phone, you know.
so was that a tough, would you say that was the toughest time in your career?
It's just tough from like I kind of look back and I'm like, God, like I was like, you don't have all I have a lot of responsibility now. I have 3
Right.
kids, married, multiple houses, right? So
Right.
like I look back at the person I am now and I'm like, God, I was a fool for making some of the decisions I made, right? But like they also shaped me and got me here, and I knew I would work hard. So when I jumped and transitioned from leads, from like refi lending tree leads to like general real estate, I started knocking on builder doors. And I was basically taking whatever deals I could get from builders that their inside lender couldn't do, wouldn't do,
Would
and
do.
closing them. And then I got started through the deals with them, through realtors and things like that. And I kind of just built up slowly. Like one of the main builders I was working with at the time was Gemcraft Homes, which they're still in existence, but predominantly like I think mostly Maryland. There's some South Central Pennsylvania stuff that they still have. But I was taking deals that their lender either wouldn't do or couldn't do and closing them,
So
got in with a couple people and, kept rolling.
so were there other people kind of in your field that you knew that didn't make it? I mean, I know being in real estate, you just see people all the time coming in
If I look
and
back to the
going out.
group of people that was in that original like refi environment that I worked in, I would say probably 95% of them don't do this anymore.
Hmm.
Some of them own roofing companies and so are successful with that. Some of them own or are highly involved in insurance companies. They're all making money and doing things and doing decent, but like a lot of people don't stick it out. Do you know what I mean?
So what do you
For
think the
whatever
difference
reason.
is? I mean, if they're clearly successful in other fields, they or even those that weren't, you were just a kid with no skill, afraid to, not really interested and excited about making phone calls.
Mhm.
What do you think the difference was? Like, why did you make it and these other people didn't?
I don't know. I probably just like don't give up. I'm like weird like that. And I can tell you some stories that, I don't know. This is like a recent story. So we went spearfishing in Playa del Carmen. We were at our company's President's Club trip. Okay. Me and my buddy had been out drinking the night before, not crazy, but, a couple drinks. Wake up, I feel fine, right? Like touch of hangover, we'll say, right? So I get on the boat, we go out, get out in the water, and I felt, pretty fine. But the thing about spearfishing, and most people don't know this unless you've done it, is you take in a lot of salt water when you're doing it. So you're diving down deep, you're coming back up, you're gasping for air. And when the water's rough, it will come up over your pipe, comes down in, and you're going to take that breath of air and you're sucking and ingesting seawater. So after a period of time, you start to regurgitate, you start throwing up. Okay. So the guide, we get back in the boat. This is after like 4 hours of this, and I'd probably thrown up like 6 times at this point. And he's
Oh my
basically,
goodness.
the guide's basically like, yeah, like probably 10% of people, like once they start throwing up, just get back in the boat and we're done. Like, like everybody else is kind of like, we're done. Like he's like 1 in 10 may keep going. You know what I mean? But I think it's just kind of like that's within me that just kind of keeps me doing. I think I probably would be successful at whatever. It's just what framework did I come up under and that kind of thing. I think I just have like a high ability to just like figure it out and deal, even in like, I'm pretty comfortable with being uncomfortable is what I would tell you, which I think most people, they get a little uncomfortable and they just kind of lay down,
Yeah. 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 I mean, I just had, I'm sure she'll love me talking about this in about 5 or 10 years, but I just was talking to my daughter last night about a situation, and it's, I won't let her quit because it's mainly just because it's uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
she's like, well, why can't I? I'm like, well, you can. Like, it's possible. There's no rules against it, but it's not a habit you want to create in your life.
No.
Um, and so, it's funny, like, you're not the only person that I've talked to or read about or seen where it's like, um, not really special compared to other people, just didn't give up. Won't
Yeah.
give up. Just like say, hey, we're going to get through this. So compare your business to the real estate business. And I know that we've talked before, and you said if you had to do it over again, you think you would go the real estate route
No, for sure.
for 100%. So tell us why that is from your perspective.
Um, I think that my business now versus when I started, my business when I started was very relationship with not only the people that referred me business, but the clients. Now it's become very digital,
Okay.
which is good and bad. With a digital experience, you lose a little bit of that personal touch, you know. Um, and with real estate, I think there's greater opportunity. I think there's greater opportunity to make money. I think there's greater opportunity to have deals that come to you that you can jump on that you may not be able to in my position because you're just kind of sitting back. And really the business starts with you guys. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like the business starts with you guys. People don't call and say, hey, I want to get approved for a mortgage. They say, hey, I want to go see that house.
Right.
There was a time where we did lead generation, you know what I mean? Like just to see that we could. Um, and the leads were very hard to convert because the most successful lead was coming off of a real estate. It was like, hey, if you want a list of homes, click here, or if you want to see this house, click here. Well, they don't want to get pre-approved for the mortgage. They want to see the house. They want to
Right.
talk to the agent. They want to, so like I think that business, there's number one, there's more opportunity. If you're good at building relationships with people, you know what I mean? And making people aware of what you do, I think it's very easy to be successful. Um, it's also one of those where we have to do probably 5 times the amount of business to make the same money. So, for me, it's a volume game and you lose a little bit of that personal touch. You know what I mean? Like you're almost needed to have a team to be super successful. And with a real estate agent, I mean, I think there's real estate agents in our market who, they're one person. They make a killing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just one of them. And
Yeah.
if they want to do a team thing, they can. If they don't have to. You know what I mean? I also think I've got a lot more freedom just from being like a self-employed standpoint. You know what I mean? Like you kind of can dictate your own pace and schedule. And we're not, like we're kind of what I would say my business is like a business within a business. They just kind of give us all the resources to do what we need to do. Where real estate, I feel like you kind of are running your own thing. And to that same point, I think that's why a lot of people don't make it. You know what I mean? Like, because they don't have anybody managing them or saying you need to do this or you need to do that, or, kind of outlining. I think, a lot of good companies have great training programs, right? Like they have the training, but you also have to be the person that's like, okay, I'm disciplined. I need to get X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly. So from your perspective, what do you think makes a good agent? Well, let me back up. You have a lot of relationships with agents. You got a great reputation. Um, and I know you get a lot of business from your relationships that you've built with agents and other folks. Unfortunately, sometimes because you do the hard work and you don't give up, and we joked about this before, you get stuck with the crap where
Sure.
another loan officer fails or there's an issue and you're like, okay, I'll clean it up, and you take
Yeah.
care of it. But with that said, you've dealt with so many real estate agents and so many. Like, what do you think you need to have to become a successful real estate agent?
I think you need to be good with relationships. I think you need to know how to speak to people. And when I say speak to people, like I'll give you an example. Like let's say you're at a soccer match and maybe you're watching your niece or nephew play, right?
Hmm.
And you run into someone or see someone that you can't be the person that's going to be like you need to be the person that's running up and saying, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you. How are you?" Catching up for 5 or 10 minutes, reconnecting. You know what I mean? Um, like that, I think is critical. Being a great listener.
Mm.
I mean, that's probably number one. Like you gotta be an amazing listener. Like your best people are great listeners. Like they're gonna ask questions, but they're also like sucking up everything everybody's putting out there. They're reading their vibes, understanding kind of what their wants, their needs, their demands are. You know what I mean? Um, Organizations super critical, but I've seen a lot of super successful people that are horrible with paperwork. You know, I think if you got the first two things kind of going, where you're a great listener and you're good with relationships, like you can kind of muddle through the other stuff. You know,
But
um,
what about personality types? I mean, I know more than the average person. You understand the different personality types. Like, and I think I know anybody can be successful, but
mhm.
from your perspective as a lender dealing with agents on that side of things, do you see any trends? Do you see any commonalities with personality types that seem to be the most successful?
um, fun, outgoing. They need to be either really approachable or like really good conversationalists, but they've got to be able to interact in some way. And look, maybe they're not the funniest person in the room, but they're great at like having a deep conversation with somebody about something. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a deep conversation about a struggle they're having in their life. Do you know what I mean? But they have to be good connectors. They have to be very good at connecting with people. I mean, I think that's probably the most critical piece of it, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that there's two types, and I've read a book that there's 7 types of realtors, and there's 5 different types of real ways to be successful in real
Mm-hmm.
estate, and you know, but I think there's really 2 types of successful realtors, and it's the relationship people or it's the numbers people.
Yeah.
And I think what I find interesting, I've always been on the relationship side, is that the people that are on the relationship side that really build those relationships, they do so much less lead generation or sphere of influence touches in order to maintain their
Yeah.
database whereas those that are just numbers based and the relationship isn't as important, they spend so much money and time on touches and continuing to help their past clients and remember that they're in real estate.
I mean, we're very relationship driven on our side, but I think we have to do a lot more lifting to kind of get the same result. You know what I mean? Like, I think you can be a lot more relational and like implemented within the community. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
you're highly involved in basketball, like those kinds
Yeah.
of things. People just, they want to do business with people that they're comfortable with. It's no different than like, you know, like a young couple, and maybe a girl starts dating a guy that she knows because he's a friend of a friend kind of thing,
Mhm.
versus like meeting some guy at like a club, like because they have mutual friends, it's a little bit more discerning.
Yeah. And that's
And
not
they're
to
more
say, I also make clear, not to say that people that are relationship realtors shouldn't still lead gen and talk, in touch.
100%.
It's just, I find that those types of realtors, because it's a habit, I'm getting off track, but it seems to be a pattern where real estate agents get busy and they don't lead gen, or they don't touch their past clients, they don't talk to them. And those that have just really built those deep relationships tend to like get more of the referrals, even though they didn't do anything for
Mhm.
it, than the other folks. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, hearing your perspective on these things. What else, like, what would you say to somebody that's getting into real estate? Do they say, hey, you talk to a lot of realtors, um, what do you think I should know to get started?
um I think that who you surround yourself with
Mm,
is going to dictate your success in real estate in the beginning. I kind of would almost give the analogy of like getting into real estate's kind of like swimming in mud. And the longer you're in it, it gets clearer and clearer and clearer. Like, you come in with this mindset that you think you know kind of what it is,
yeah.
but until you've done it for several years, you don't really know. Um, we see people get in the loan business all the time, and like I'll tell them they need to be hyper focused on like, you know, relationships, whether it's builder, realtor, divorce attorney, whatever it is. But yet they'll spend 80% of their days working on deals and 20% of their days working on lead gen. And I'm like, it needs to be the other way around,
Mm,
you know, like go get more deals. Stop working on, this deal because it doesn't qualify, and you stop taking so long to figure out that it doesn't qualify. Like, just come to someone, let them look at it, like that kind of thing. Like, they spend, because it's easier. It's easier to sit at your desk than it is to do the hard activities that generate business. I mean, that's no different for even tenured people on both sides. Everybody always wants to do the stuff that's warm and fuzzy, but consequently, the stuff that makes you the most money is not always the easiest stuff.
yeah, it always cracks me up when I'm meeting with groups of people thinking about getting into real estate. And I always will get a question that says, who gives you leads, essentially? Who's going to give me leads? You know, and obviously, you most of the time those people are not getting in, or they're not going to be, if they do, they're not going to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
because that is the business, basically. Um, but let me switch gears a little bit, because you have a really successful business. So I think by most standards, and I think the 21, or the 21-year-old you were coming out of culinary school, if you said, hey, this is where you're going to be, and this is going to be your income, and you're going to be leading a team, and I assume you would be pretty happy with that and say, man, I'm pretty successful. But now that you're here, like, do
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you're successful? Do you feel like a success?
I feel like if I had spent, I literally said this to my wife last night. I said, if I would have known 10 years ago what I know today, I
Hmm.
would be retired. Period.
So what do you
I
mean by
wouldn't
that?
I
You
wouldn't have to
talking
go to
about
work,
are you talking about just investing? Are you talking about saving? Are
everything.
you talking
Just life. You know what I mean? Like real estate, assets, owning real estate, buying real estate, what to look for, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of all those things. I feel like, number one, I think people are incredibly stupid with their money. They buy a ton of stuff that they don't need, myself included. Um, People are incredibly wasteful. They spend on things that they don't need. Um, and I'm just as guilty. So I'm not saying that like, you shouldn't, but, and also I think everybody works real hard for a little bit of time and they want to reward themselves. They want to treat themselves constantly. And I think, if I'd have gone back in time, I'd have been a lot more smart with my money.
So
I'd have, even just going back, let's say I would have 10 years ago, I'd have bought 10 single family ranchers and totally would have been doable for me at the time. Just knowing what I know about mortgages and how to qualify and how to get people in them, I would have 10 properties worth probably $2 million total right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, just like there's so many little things that I know about buying assets and things that like if you roll back the clock, you know what I mean? You're like, whew, you're catching it. And it's part of that is like growing up and learning, but that's why I say like super important to be very educated, like constantly picking up the books. If you don't like reading, listen it on Audible, like, but you need to be getting your dose, like tons of it. Like that was a big miss for me for a long time. I probably didn't even get into reading books until I was like 37. Like hated
Mm. So what got you started in reading? I mean, that's something that if someone doesn't want like doing it at a young age, they typically never do it.
it.
Or what was the way that you overcame that lack of desire to do it? What triggered you just to create this habit?
I started listening to a bunch of podcasts on things, and
Okay.
people would talk about certain things, and I didn't understand it, and that drove me nuts. And that was a little bit of a trigger for me to be like, okay, well, I need to learn about this. You know what I mean? So then you pick up one thing, you start learning about it, and you're like, and some of this stuff may be just like that I plug into. Maybe it's motivational, right? Like maybe it's motivational stuff. Like talking about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean, that's a quote
Mhm.
from a motivational person. That's not my quote. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Um, but it's very true. And that's like one of those statements where like it kind of resonates with me because I'm like, yeah, I've always kind of had a high ability to just like be in pain and suffering and deal and push through, but it also kind of keeps you successful. But like reading those books, you know, accountability books, books on real estate, books on personal development, books on accounting, books on, that's what you plug into, like if I had to go back and do life over, it would be a thing of probably taking jobs that taught me, not taking jobs for money, taking
Mm.
jobs where I would really learn a lot from either the person who I work for or the business that I work for, to make me more well-rounded, to make me understand something. Like I, to this day, wish that I had some level of background in construction. You know what I mean? Like I understand it a lot more now than I did, but like how to price what something should cost, if I'm overpaying, if I'm underpaying, like it is a huge, huge skill that a lot of people take for granted. If you're going to buy and renovate a property, or I don't know, flip a property for that matter,
Mhm.
like having the connections, being able to know what you can, or are supposed to pay for something. I mean, it's invaluable.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I can't do any. I mean, I can barely hang a picture. So like, I wish I knew a lot of things and could do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Um, I want to head back to you talked about how important you feel it is to surround yourself with the right people.
Yep.
Um, so if somebody has never thought about that, or maybe they've heard it before, but or they're young, um, how do you decide, how would you go back 10, 20 years? How would you decide who to hang out with? And and I know it's not necessarily just hanging out with them, but you can be an introvert and be around people and still never learn
Yeah.
anything. Like, what would your advice be to say, we'll just say somebody young that we say, hey, I heard you say I need to surround myself with a certain type of people. Where do I start? What do I do?
Uh, I think you first start with figuring out who you are, like what's important to you, you know. Um, I'm a big believer in, you know, high moral fiber, high moral character.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I think birds of a feather flock together eventually over time. Um, I think infidelity runs rampant in all facets of industry nowadays. And I'm not saying that like I don't condone it. It happens. Do you know what I mean? But like I think if you're a person who looks negatively upon that, then you're going to flock to those people who look negatively upon that and who maybe have a higher moral character. I mean, I think like you can work around highly successful people that have bad moral character, but being able to see that they have bad moral character and being able to understand the difference between right and wrong, it's important, Um, that for me is probably like if I went back in time, that would be like a big suggestion that I would make to myself. Like at a young age, I was always like everybody else, you're always so concerned with fitting in and
hmm
and things like that. I mean, I think the older I get, the less I care about fitting in and the more I care just about like doing things the right way, you know what I mean? And with some decent level of moral character about myself. I think a lot of people lack that in today's society, and I think it's not going to get it better. I think it will only continue to get worse.
Yeah.
Um, like I hear a lot of times where like a lender will like get a loan application and they just won't call the person and tell them that they don't qualify.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's not our process. Our process is to not only call them and tell them they don't qualify, but tell them what they need to do to get into the position to qualify, and maybe outline some steps that they need to take. Like, I don't know. I think you got to be the person that you would want to deal with on the other end. Like look for what you would want to get out of it. And if you don't know the answers to those questions, you need to figure them out, like that's I think really really critical. I think how you're raised plays a big part in it too, like
Well,
you may know.
it's also difficult. I just think when you're in 100% commission or really high commission environment, whether that's mortgages, whether it's real estate, whether it's car sales or any type of sales, I just think it attracts people that are very highly money motivated. And
Mhm.
in those cases, if they're really money motivated by money, that's their number one. And when it's their number one, that means it's number one over people and over, doing the right thing. And, I think we see that. I feel like
There's a
maybe I'm just
lot.
looking at the world through rose colored glasses. I just feel like there's a higher percentage of people in these fields that are me first and money first. And maybe it's that way across the board. You just don't see it as much because there's not such an opportunity to make money by taking advantage of people or by not doing the right thing.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's scary. That was the number one thing that freaked me out when I got into this business because I was always in customer service. Um, and so it was like you get paid your salary or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're good or bad or you're getting paid the same. So you might as well help people out, like do the right
Right.
thing for them because it doesn't affect you. There was no opportunity to do the wrong thing for them and make more money. And so getting into this business, I just assumed that's how
Mhm.
people operate. Like it blew my mind and people would take advantage of others.
I grew up in sunshine and kittens too, buddy. I get it. Like that's the family I grew up in. You know what I mean? Like real estate, restaurant industry, it was culture shock for me, like to this day. And it's hardened me and it shaped me in a way that I'll never change as a result of it. But like it's not all bad. You know what I mean? You have like a lot of great people that are doing this, that are in
Yeah.
it, that, want to help and want to serve. And, like I just think like knowing who you are from that perspective and knowing what's important to you will allow you to get around the right people that'll help shape your success.
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm
Oh,
saying?
absolutely. Yeah. Um, it's really interesting. The more interviews that I do, the more successful people that I talk to, it's a lot of the same things, but in different ways. I mean, but the overall principle of So many people are just successful because they won't give up. They're not necessarily the smartest or the most educated. It's just fascinating. And of course, hearing you talk about your massive change. I mean, think about it. Like, no college education, don't like to read, no people skills. I mean, really, like, who says Andrew Harkins 20 years ago is going to become super successful, and this dude that's eager to learn and wants to read and is talking about these things, like, and you can say that to most of us when we were young, but still,
Mhm.
most people agree or disagree. Most people are basically who they are at their core when they're teenagers.
I agree. I agree there's some things that can change, but I think like if you're a sinister evil person when you're 15, you're probably going to be a sinister evil person at 55. You know what I mean? Like, and if you
Mhm.
have high moral character and good moral fiber about you at a young age, you're probably going to have it at an old age, you know?
Yeah, I think the most impressive thing about you is we create, and I talk to my kids about this all the time. You create habits. You don't realize you're creating them, but
Mhm.
you create habits, and these habits that you have created as you go into adulthood, they're so difficult to change. Most
So
people most people can't change their habits. I mean, they can. It's possible, but and for you to really, your story is you changed. You don't quit, and you just changed. Like,
if
you were
I go
willing.
back in time, I
Well,
would
it's your.
probably, I don't know, maybe when I was like 25, 26, I probably weighed 315 pounds,
Oh,
which now I'm probably like 245. So it's not like a huge difference, right? I'm
that's a
always
pretty
just
big difference.
a bigger guy, right? But like diet and exercise became important and critical. Like what I told some the other day, I feel like when I hit 40, I'm like a walking men's health journal. Like literally what I listen to, podcast wise, what I'm reading, you know what I mean? Like health, exercise, like all the things that when you're in your 20s, like you're like, whatever. They all become like the most important thing to you, you know, kids, wife, relationship. It's like, and you're right. A lot of people don't evolve. They don't change. They don't realize the habits or the errors of their ways. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think it's a lot of you gotta kind of get comfortable with things that aren't necessarily super easy to do. If you want to be successful and be good at whatever you're doing.
So what's your next challenge in terms of, like, I mean, you've done a lot of you mentioned about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Yep.
So are you looking for the next thing to be comfortable with being uncomfortable with?
Well,
Do
I
you
mean, we're
enjoy this? I mean, you talk these are successes. Like, you look back, you're like, okay, you dropped all that weight. That takes effort, discipline,
yep.
consistency. There's a lot of things that you've done that were changing habits, effort, not giving up, and being consistent about it. So, like, kind of back to the do you feel successful question. Like, are you like, yes, I've built myself a nice life, or are you looking for something new? Are you
Oh
constantly
man.
striving to grow in these certain areas? Because uh, anybody that has kids knows that they can suck the life out of you. So you've got three of them. Like, where are you at in that success level? Do you feel like, okay, I got it, we're set, I'm going to continue on this pathway? Do you need more?
Mhm.
Do you need another challenge?
I'm like, it's weird. I'm always looking at ways to do it easier and better, but
Uh-huh.
also looking at things that like challenge me. Um, I mean, if I go back in time, it went from being a chef to jumping into real estate. There was a time I was riding horses. We have a couple
Oh,
horses we train that are world champions.
oh my
Did that
gosh.
for a couple years. I didn't even touch on that. Did that for a couple years. Then I got really into hunting for a period of time. Shot a bunch of animals. Still hunt all the time. Um, right now I'm super focused on like real estate and buying real estate, like working on short-term rentals, that kind of stuff. We have one we're working on right now. We're going to go buy another after that, but just kind of getting that up and rolling and learning that whole racket. have other rentals here in the area, but just, trying to, I don't know, just trying to constantly improve and like get myself to a situation. I think I'll always work and work hard and always probably be doing what I'm doing, but it's just having that ability to be able to say like, hey, I need you to manage this for 3 weeks because I'm going to go to Europe. You know what I mean? Like, and being able to actually do it, but also have the people in place. Like, for me, it's a challenge, even just getting the right people in place to be able to do something
Mm.
like that. And I enjoy work, like getting to a point to like get those people in place, like the team that I have now is absolutely like amazing. I mean, they're some of the best people I've ever worked with. Um, and I don't know how I would do my day to day without them, kind of thing. Like they're super reliable and you can basically look to them in the world, but I'm always on to something else, man. I probably get pretty complacent pretty quick.
So you're always looking for the next challenge.
Oh God, yeah. I'm not by any means satisfied ever.
Do you let's talk about, and I appreciate the time that you've given, and I know we're running a little bit long, but I want to, you say you have a really great team,
Yep,
and real estate agents, everybody that builds a big business in any industry, eventually they're building a team to create leverage or to grow.
sure.
What are the biggest keys, do you think, in building a really good team?
Um, Everyone on the team has to care. If they don't care, they don't have a place.
And what do you mean by they have to care?
Like I don't know, when I was a chef, it would be like one of those things of like you would have like a cook, and I'll use this as an example because I think this is a really easy one to understand. And anybody who's ever worked in a restaurant will get this. So every day you have the prep from yesterday that you pull out, and maybe it's like 10 New York strip steaks, right? 5 burgers, and you're pulling it out, getting ready for the dinner rush that night. If someone that would work for me in the restaurant business would come in and be like, okay, I'm going to put these steaks in here. And, maybe we have like these onions that go on top of this steak that are like a caramelized onion or something like that, right? Like if I was a chef and you would put something on a burger that you wouldn't eat, you wouldn't work for me. You know what I mean? So like my idea is you're going to treat people how you'd want to be treated, like constantly, and like always go the extra mile. um and if somebody kind of like lacks that or doesn't have it or kind of like pulls that like I don't give a shit kind of attitude, like doesn't have a place. Like when I was a chef, if like you weren't willing to eat everything that was on your station, see ya. You know what I mean? Like food needs to be the highest quality and the best. And that's kind of how we look at like loan business too. I mean, you're always going to run into people that just like kind of don't care, or it's like not their main focus. Um, that doesn't work. Let me just put it like that. When you work at a high level, I mean, but I don't expect out of people what I wouldn't do myself. Let me say that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Does that make sense? I mean, I
Yeah,
might be
yeah.
coming off like a little bit of a hard ass, but like, I'm not saying like last night I had somebody email me at 10 o'clock, saw it at 5:30 this morning, and they needed something and I had it to them by like 7. You know what I mean? Like I didn't realize that I got an email at 10, or I probably would have done it then. Just something that wasn't even like a trivial thing, just to get them a cost estimate for a deal for a family member. So
So how did you find these people? I mean, you know what you're looking for. Was there, when you have a new position or you think you need to hire somebody, or, I mean, clearly you can tell if someone's not doing a great job and you can
mhm.
get rid of them. But how do you handle, because that's the big thing. Okay, so that's what I'm getting at, is it's very difficult to find people like that. And
Yeah,
I heard so many stories about agents that have hired assistants that are failures, and it's so expensive and it's so stressful to have
Yeah.
somebody that's not a great fit, and then have to let them go, then find somebody else. Do you, I mean, any secrets, any keys to help the team
So
builders out there?
we use a personality report called disc evaluation, kind of
Okay.
similar to KPA,
Yep.
to hire. I've had several people that I loved, but that report has basically said this won't work, kind of thing.
Mm,
Like when you look at it and I follow it, like I don't bend on it, I don't flex on it. If you're not right for the position based on what's on there, we won't hire you. And that has really, really, really helped. Calling the references,
mm,
asking a lot of questions. The one thing I always do with people is if I'm trying to bring them on board and I'm thinking they're questioning it or have a misconception about what the job looks like day to day, I offer them to come sit with me for a day, see what it looks like.
okay.
I also want the other teammates buy-in on the people. So if there's a question about whether the relationships would work well or not together or not, I'll let them interview them sometimes. Um, because that team synergy is huge. I've seen one person destroy teams
Mm,
in real estate. I've seen it happen multiple times
yeah.
where you get one bad person in there, and you know what I mean. I think a lot of people will make bad hires. They're so eager to build that they don't realize that they're putting the wrong people in
Mm,
place, and your foundation's like super critical. And then you get like, I mean, a lot of things are circumstantial. Like we've had some weird market conditions this year and last year, right? Um, and a lot of people have jumped into both businesses, real estate, mortgages, you know. So I think like that piece of it's been, you have a lot of people in there, they're trying to do it, they're trying to get it to work. Um, I think you got to go with your gut on a lot of things. I mean, I think use all the information you have. Like we'll evaluate people with a disc report. We'll interview them 2 and 3 times, sometimes 4 times. I'll have multiple people interview them. But then a lot of it's gut. You know what I mean? Like there's been things that have happened where I've said that may not work out long term, but it'll work out for a period of time. And usually you're right. You know what I mean? Like, or hey, I think this is going to be somebody I'm going to work with for a long time. And when they leave, I'm going to be really sad, but I'll have them for like 5 or 6 years kind of thing. And I also believe in like compensating people like what they're truly worth. Like
mm,
you got to pay them well. I think a lot of people are like this business draws people that are very like money hungry. So sometimes people are a little short sighted,
yeah.
in the aspect of like, I'm going to try to keep a little bit more in my pocket. And it's like, well, if you have this really great person that's going to make you know, allow you to do more business or help make you money, right? You need to compensate them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying people don't need to pay their dues and like for a period of time, but you need to take care of people, you need to pay them what they're worth. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, man. This is yeah, this was much longer than I thought. I mean, we got into a lot of different spaces that I wasn't expecting, and I learned a whole lot about you that I didn't know, which is really cool. Any kind of last words or anything you'd like to share, before we
I mean,
kind
like I
of
told you
shop?
before, I definitely think like a career in real estate has like literally unlimited potential.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
It's all about what you're willing to put into it and how you want to scale it and how you want to grow it and what's important to you. But if you find that, like, I feel like if people find that they're like super driven and very good with relationships, I think it's a great career for them. And I think that they could live an amazing life that they would never expect to be able to live. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I agree.
I'm a big, big believer in it, man. Like, but at a young age, I didn't, when I didn't know anything about anything, like you're just kind of like, oh, real estate agent, okay, whatever.
Well, that's what I love to do. It's one of the things I love to do is try to help people learn about real estate and try to help them get into it, and not just recruit, but to really explain what it's about and make sure they understand going in with their eyes wide open, not just put people in a position where they get surprised and they end up being part of the 90%, 80% that ends up getting out anyway. But look, man, hey, I really appreciate the time. This was
Sure.
awesome. And last call, you got any good book recommendations?
I got a couple.
No pressure right at the end.
Let me turn my phone back on because they're on here. I don't remember them by name. Real estate books.
Anything, success books, whatever impacted you. What impacted you this year?
I would say read Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Mm.
That's a good one. As far as like real estate books, if you're into short-term rentals, read Host Coach. That's a good one.
Okay,
I've read
Host
a lot of,
Coach.
yep, I've read a lot of short-term rental books.
Okay.
There's one right now that I'm reading that I felt like was a good read. It's called Relentless by Tim Grover. That's a guy that,
Oh, Michael Jordan's trainer, right?
yep, great book.
Yep.
Did you read that one?
Yep. I love
Great
it.
book.
I love it.
Indoor by Cameron Haynes. That's a good one. And any of the David Goggins books are awesome for
Okay.
motivation.
Awesome, man.
His first one's really good for like keeping you accountable to life.
So
You ever read those books? The David
Goggins, never read any of
Yes,
those.
read that. That guy, he gets on there and he has like an accountability mirror where he writes out all his things that he feels like he's bad at, needs to do, been putting on the back burner, and like he looks at it every day. Like he's just real big on like manning up and doing what he needs to do. And like, you know, kind of doing the uncomfortable tasks first, you know, like it's a really good mindset book. And honestly, like it applies to all aspects of life, but definitely applies big to real estate because there's a lot of things that are like, oh, I have these 10 things to do today.
Yes.
And these 3 I hate, but they'll make me the most money. So I do them last.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know exactly. I mean, that's a common flaw or mistake that real estate agents make.
It gives you clairvoyance on that piece for sure. So, but yeah, those are some good books. And the ones you got behind you, I haven't read them, but I got to read those. Those are on my list.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Appreciate the recommendations. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the story. It's, you know, you are super successful and it's, you know, there's a reason for it. And I hope everybody got something out of this, that made it this far. So
yeah,
thanks
man.
again, man.
We'll have to do it again. I appreciate it. I'll see you.
All right. Take care.